Windows as an operating system has been around for a long time, meaning it's gone through a lot of design changes throughout the years. From Luna to Arrow, there have been many different design elements used throughout the history of Windows, and today, me and a friend of mine will be ranking each Windows version based on their design.
Hello, I'm Maath, I think. I'm going to be helping Marigold rank every version of Windows. Over the years, I've fiddled around with lots of versions of Windows and I've loved pretty much all of the designs, so I'm excited to rank all of these. Let's begin. While I haven't used much of Windows 3.1, I do know that it looks kinda meh in my opinion. Maybe I'm just spoiled with having a start menu for like my whole life, but I really hate the fact that there just isn't a start menu. It just doesn't feel right to me. I also hate how clunky and blocky looking the UI looks. It looks really ugly.
I do agree with Maath that Windows 3.1 looks a bit mixed. The aesthetic seems kind of generic, even for the time, and the icons mixed with the rest of the UI don't blend very well together in my opinion. To be fair, this is one of the earliest versions of Windows that didn't look like a bunch of random colors thrown together in boxes, so I can at least give 3.1 credit for that.
In my opinion, I almost feel as if 3.1 doesn't really have an aesthetic. It's just blocks. I think Windows 3.1 deserves a D.
I'm gonna have to agree, but I'll give it a C for being one of the first Windows versions with more interesting graphics. Windows 95 is the first Windows version with the iconic Start menu, which has been a staple ever since. Windows 95 also looks a bit more refined in its aesthetic. Sure, it's still a blocky interface, but I think the way it's used here is better in my opinion.
I agree heavily with Marigold on this one. Although I don't really like most of the early Windows designs, like from 3.1 to 98, they look really blocky in my opinion. Windows 95 is when Windows started to actually look pretty good, and when it had a Start menu. Oh man, the Start menu. Don't even get me started on how much I love that. It does look ugly on Windows 95 though, but I can appreciate it for what it is. I think Windows 95 deserves a C.
I'm also going to give it a C for still being a bit generic, but at the very least adding the Start menu. Windows 98 looks mostly similar to 95 in terms of the user interface alone, but some of the design that went into the operating system looks superior in my opinion. For example, the File Explorer has more graphics than 95's version of the program ever did. Instead of being a simple blocky interface, they added a header featuring graphics that appear to be inspired by clouds. The packaging for the operating system looks superior to Windows 95 in my opinion, since it has more personality with the cloudburst background. Windows 95 just places the logo on top of clouds, but the 98 box art lets the logo interact with these clouds.
I don't really have much to say about this one, because I feel like Marigold said pretty much everything I feel about 98. But I will say I love 98's sound design compared to 95, especially the banger-ass music for the Welcome to Windows 98 screen when you start up your computer. It also has a way nicer sounding startup sound compared to 95 in my opinion. I think 98 deserves a B just because of the better graphic and sound design.
I will give this a B as well for the same reasons.
Windows 2000 in my opinion is when Windows actually starts to pick up in terms of design, and way more appealing as well. The UI itself doesn't exactly have too much going for it, but Windows 2000 adds way more customization options to make it look a lot better. I also like how the startup screen looks like this time around, because it has a little loading bar on the bottom to show when it's going to start up. That's something 95 and 98 didn't have. The startup sound in my opinion does sound pretty good as well, but I don't really like it as much as 98 and 95's. I don't have a lot to say about 2000, but I like it how it looks better than 98 and 95 in most aspects.
I think Windows 2000 further refines upon the UI introduced in 95 and 98 by adding gradients instead of simple colors. I also think the logo looks beautiful. There isn't much to say, but I will give this a B.
I think Windows 2000 in my opinion will get a B.
Windows Me didn't really change anything in terms of design, and from what I know, it was a pretty mediocre operating system on its own. I'm going to skip straight to the rating and give this a C for barely being any different. I personally think Windows XP is a little overrated compared to later versions of Windows, but to give credit where it's due, it's the first Windows version to stray away from the blocky UI, finally, and instead put skeuomorphism to use. I think it does a pretty good job of using 3D textures. I've always liked the Luna style, and the Bliss wallpaper is so iconic that it's apparently the most viewed image ever. The icons also finally look more interesting compared to the MS-DOS based versions of Windows.
Just like Marigold just said, compared to the later versions of Windows, XP is kinda overrated in that regard. I definitely do not find it to be the best looking version of Windows, but I find it to be really good still. I especially love how the UI looks this time around, and the shade of blue it uses. It even adds that ugly blocky UI as a customization option for people that for some reason like that. Why would you want that? Windows XP must have had something in an operating system that worked pretty well as well, because Roblox supported it until August 2019. I think Windows XP deserves an S tier for being iconic and also looking beautiful.
I'm going to give it an A tier. Despite its iconic look, I think there are other versions of Windows that look a bit better, such as Windows Vista is one of my favorite Windows versions design-wise. It might just be because I was used to using it when I was 6, but I've always loved the glass textures it uses. I also love the default wallpaper because of its excellent looking color palette and lighting. I also like most of the new icons introduced in this version of Windows as well, since they really pair well together with the rest of the UI's glossy theme.
I genuinely think people only hated Windows Vista just because they had really shitty computers in 2007. It was the first version of Windows I've ever used and it ran fine, but that was probably just because I had a good laptop. I think it also has the best looking design compared to like every other version of Windows, but 11's a pretty hard contender. The glossy materials, textures, widgets, though I'm not sure many people use them, and the amazing wallpapers that came packaged with Vista. I genuinely also think Vista is way better than 7 in some aspects. I would have to put Vista an S above XP's design.
I'm gonna give it an S as well, since it's so underrated for its design. Windows 7 took what Windows Vista introduced and refined upon it. The taskbar is bigger, you can move widgets wherever, and the new wallpaper looks very nice. I'd have to disagree that Vista is better than 7 though, since I like the slightly brighter and more vibrant look of 7 compared to Vista's look. I also much prefer the bigger taskbar compared to the small one in Windows Vista. 7's background is probably my favorite, because it takes the Windows logo and turns it into this beautiful arrangement of nature-related shapes and textures.
Some of you guys are gonna probably hate me for this. I love Windows 7, I love its customization features, and it's the second best looking Windows version. But Vista, in my opinion, had a way better looking design. I like 7's vibrant and bright looking colors, but Vista having a darker color palette is just easier on my eyes, at least. And it manages to make it look beautiful and also not destroy my retinas. This is where you guys might also hate me a bit as well, but I think Vista's default wallpaper is way better than 7's. Keep in mind this is just design-wise though. I think 7 as an OS is way better than Vista. But since we're talking about design here, I'm going to be giving 7 an S above Vista.
I'm gonna go ahead and give this an S too, but above Vista, because I personally prefer the brighter color palette of Windows 7's design aesthetic.
I think that Windows 8 as an OS is kind of underrated, but not design-wise. I do agree that as an OS, it kind of sucked in some aspects, but I thought it was mostly alright to use. But I think the design isn't that bad. Even in 8 I think it looked fine, but obviously 8.1 did make things look and perform a lot better than 8. But oh my god. The start menu. Why did they assume everybody was going to use it as a tablet? Why is it in full screen? Why is everything so close together? Why does it look like that? I will give 8 some credit, as it kept most of Windows Vista and 7's icons and design for some parts, even refining it in some parts of the OS. But my god, the start menu kills the OS, even in 8.1. I also hate how in Windows 8 the start button just isn't there in the corner. Like literally, why did they think that was a good idea? If it weren't for the start menu, I think Windows 8 would be in the lowest tier of S, but because of it, I think Windows 8 is just going to get top of B.
I will give it a low B, mainly for removing the start menu and the start button in the original version of 8. Windows 10 looked kinda generic in my opinion. The UI always looked way too flat in my opinion, and so did the icons. Props to them for at least making the icons look more similar to the UI this time, but they did it in the most boring way possible. The fact that this version was forced onto everyone too made it even worse in my opinion. I wish they had involved some more depth into the design of Windows 10, because the flat aesthetic looks really bland in my opinion.
I think Windows 10 as an OS is what 8 should have been, but oh my god, the design is boring as hell. The flat icons, the start menu, but I'm glad they made it not full screen. And the UI is just really boring. I think they genuinely kind of went back to the blocky UI, because it looks a lot like squares and lines. Windows 10 as an OS performs great and even has some really good optimizations for older hardware from what I've used, but the design is just garbage. I'm gonna have to put Windows 10 design in D above 3.1.
I'm going to give it a D as well for being so flat and boring. Windows 11 is the most recent version of Windows, and in terms of design is one of the best in my opinion. I still prefer 7 over 11, but Windows 11 has some beautiful examples of modern design. Microsoft's new approach on design in general, named Fluent, looks a lot better than the Metro design aesthetic. I love the vibrant colors, and they've done a great job on returning depth to the operating system's design.
Remember when I said 11 is a big contender for being better than Vista? Well, it's very true. I think 11 is what Windows 8 and 10 should have been, but in the best way possible. From the start menu actually looking really good, the icons, the taskbar. I love the taskbar on Windows 11. Even the emojis. Windows 11 brings back the transparent windows like Vista and 7 had, which looks amazing. I think if your computer runs Windows 10 and is capable of running 11, there's really no reason not to upgrade. It's just the same great OS and optimizations that Windows 10 had, but with a way superior design. The only thing I have to say about Windows 11 is the center taskbar, but they do literally let you change that in settings, so it's not that big of a deal. I think Windows 11 will be an S tier for me, right above Vista.
I'm going to give this an S as well, below Vista. Overall, the design aesthetics of Windows have tended to change frequently, but I find it cool that every new version of Windows has something new to bring in terms of design. Thanks for joining me and Math in ranking Windows versions based on their design. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and sub if you want more content like this. Make sure to sub to Math as well. They make some great content. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next video.